SciByte is produced by JupiterBroadcasting.com. Check us out! Hi everyone, you're listening to SciByte. That's Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly science, news, and more podcast, streamed live on November 15th. My name is Chris, and joining me like every week is Heather.
Hello, Chris.
Hey there, Heather. I should say thanks to ScaleEngine.com this week for providing the new fancy live stream we have over at jblive.tv. Alan hooked us up with this really new sophisticated stream, so I'm giving him a plug because it's really cool. We got a big show today, don't we? What do we got coming up?
We do. We are talking about memory, flexible brain implants, supernovas, light absorption, the space station crew, getting an update on the Phobos-Grunt mission that we talked about last week.
Oh, yes.
And always looking back into history and up in the sky.
That's one of my favorite parts. So towards the end of the show, we'll cover what happened this week in science history and then what you can look forward to in the science near future. But
yes,
last week we had a bit of a boo-boo. We wanted to get a correction up front, right? It's like the small thing. It's like the difference between fission and fusion, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's one letter, but a world of difference.
That's right.
I was talking about, the first fit reactor and whether we use this. The nuclear power plants that we use now are fusion. I'm looking at my notes right now very carefully.
Right, make sure you read it word for word.
Okay, the fission reactors used in current nuclear fission. Mess it up again. Fission reactors are currently reused. The fusion reactor that was more recent, they don't really have radioactive waste as a byproduct. They use a different type of reaction. The fission reactors that we use now, they started back in 42.
Ah, okay. So that's right. This came in the week behind, or the science in the past. That's right. That's where this came up last week. Okay. You had actually figured that out like just as we'd wrapped up the show, huh?
Yeah, I was like,
You're
you know what? I'm betting I messed up fission and fusion.
Yeah, well, I would have too.
And I looked back and yep, sure enough.
What do you say we open up the old SciByte mailbag here? Because I even have one of those up right here. We've got an email.
Look at that.
I know, there it is. So this one is what's the deal with how do you pronounce it? Ceres? Ceres. What's the deal with Ceres? That's what email we got this week.
Yeah, that is the largest main belt asteroid. That's the main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The biggest object there is Ceres. It's a third of the mass of the entire asteroid belt is in this one object.
Wow.
It was the first object discovered in the asteroid belt back in 1801. And the confusion that's coming up is it is designated as a dwarf planet. Just like Pluto and its companion, its moon, Charon, got downgraded to dwarf planet. Ceres got the upgrade.
Oh, so this guy got upgraded from rock status to planet status. Now, this is a perfectly, at least in the image we have here in the show notes, like a perfectly round object. It looks like a planet.
It's just one little digit shy. They said, it's got to be round, it's got to have this or that, and the only thing it's missing is that it hasn't cleared the area around it because there's so much rock around it. There are all these other asteroids.
Right, so this because it has to be like what do they call it? Like a cleared object or something like that? Or it can't have so many things around it? And so because it's surrounded by so many different space objects that also just dequalifies it from being a planet?
Yeah. Otherwise, it might have been the fifth planet.
Oh, wow. So it's really that close.
Yeah, it is really close. But one of the things that confuses people is that it was a big deal in 2006 when they actually defined the word planet because we didn't have an official definition until that time.
Gotcha.
They've never defined the word asteroid. So it sort of has both. It's the biggest asteroid, and it is a dwarf planet.
And this thing's not ever going to come hurling at us or anything like that, right?
No, it's perfectly happy in a stable circular orbit where it is. It's just that it is a dwarf. The reason that there's a lot of confusion with it is generally because it is technically a dwarf planet, but NASA has a mission going to it. They refer to it as the largest asteroid object. Academic textbooks still refer to it as an asteroid object and a dwarf planet. So it kind of has a dual title.
Okay. That's interesting. You know, what's funny with all the hubbub about Pluto, I never heard that anybody actually got their status upgraded. So this guy's like, shut up, I like it. This is nice. This is cool. So his confusion was it's this huge object. It should be a planet, right? This, I should mention the listener that wrote in, his name was Rich. So thanks for Rich for sending that in.
Yeah, this is one of the objects that got technically closer to fulfilling its planet status than Pluto for a while.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So everyone's like, well, if we still have Pluto a planet, then this definitely has to be a planet. There's got to be some subform for these guys.
It's funny here you have in the notes, you say NASA continues, though, to refer it in some of their public engagement speakings as just an asteroid still. Like an press announcement from just this year. They called it an asteroid still.
Yeah, well, they have the Dawn mission. It's going to a couple of asteroids in the belt. And this is one of them that they had scheduled, and they launched it. Like they launched the Pluto probe, and in its planning stage, it was still a planet. So this is one of those where they launched it in their planning stages, and they're like, this is an asteroid mission. It's still an asteroid, sort of.
I see. Well, there you go. Any other thoughts on that one? That's a great email from Rich.
That was.
I like that one. No, all right. So before we move on, I want to mention one quick thing. Is we had Audible a couple of weeks ago as a sponsor. They've come back, and they're sponsoring this episode. So we've done Mars and I talked before the show, and we've made a book pick. We want to start doing these on SciByte when we get an Audible sponsorship, because we'll give you a book pick. You can find the old picks over at store.jupiterbroadcasting.com. I'll try to be diligent about keeping that list up to date for folks. So if they want to catch up on ones we've recommended before, they'll be able to find them there. But this week, the book that we're going to talk about is it's a Star Wars: The Old Republic tie-in book, isn't it?
It is. It
Tell people about this. I'll play a clip for it, but do you want to set it up at all? It looks like backstory for the video game, right?
Yeah, the MMO that's coming out next month, this is backstory. It's sort of bridging the gap between the KOTOR video games that BioWare put out and the MMO. There's 300 years between the two storylines, and this book is sort of set just after the video games, sort of leading you into where the story was going to the MMO.
So as in, this is the perfect kind of thing for people like you who are really excited about the launch and trying to absorb everything about the world.
Oh, yes. There's a whole series of these books, but this is definitely a key one.
Well, here, I'll play a clip from it, and then we'll have a link to this in the show notes if folks want to support the show and go pick it up.
He proceeded out onto the balcony, where he stopped and stared out across Coruscant's endless cityscape. Traffic in the galactic capital never stopped, and he found the constant buzz and blur of shuttles speeding by soothing. He leaned out over the railing of the balcony as far as he could, his eyes unable to pierce the darkness to make out the planet's surface hundreds of stories below.
That sounds so cool. You hear all the sound effects?
Yeah.
That's 10 hours.
Yeah, there's
That's
a
10
lot
hours
of sound
and 55
effects.
minutes.
The guy does pretty good voices for the characters. So he kind of, has a certain voice for this character and a certain voice for that character. And it really jumps out. It's very engaging. I was trying to look at some science stories, and it was being played on the speakers beside me, and I kept finding myself going like, oh yeah, I was reading a science story. He
sounds like a really fantastic narrator. Some of the Star Trek books that I've gotten on here are also about 10 hours long. Now, a lot of the books that I read off of Audible are like 20, 22 hours long. So they're kind of, a little longer of an experience, but they don't necessarily have all the sound effects, like the ships flying and stuff like that. So that's kind of a fun
I
thing.
really enjoy those. And I've heard this guy do some other Old Republic books, and he's really good. It's always really enjoyable.
Yeah, they have a whole
series. And the hours go by
them.
Much faster than you think they would.
And it's an awesome book for commuting or when you're like doing yard work and stuff like that. So go check out the link in the show notes. You do have to use that link to give us credit and support the show. And then also you can find the previous books we've picked over at store.jupiterbroadcasting.com. There you have it. What do you say, Marsh? Shall we move on to the news? This is an update this week, isn't it? Our first story.
That is. Last week, just a few hours before we filmed the show, the Russians sent off their Phobos-Grunt mission that was going to land.
The Phobos-Grunt.
Yes. Well, Grunt is Russian for soil or something similar.
Okay.
And it was, their first big interplanetary mission since 96. And it separated from its boosters. It was a pretty launch. And 2 hours later, The engines were supposed to fire.
Uh-oh.
They did not. It is currently stuck in low Earth orbit, about half the height to the space station.
Oh no.
Yeah, they only have
it didn't even like make it out of our own backyard.
No, it was supposed to go into this low parking orbit, fire off its engines, go into a big elliptical orbit around the Earth, and then just a few hours after that, shoot off its engines to head off to Mars.
So are they able to do any kind of fixing once it's up there? Like, can they connect to the computer system?
They're trying. Originally, they thought they'd only have a few days to fix this issue.
Oh, that really? Because it would then fall back?
That it would fall back down, and they were worried because it just launched. It had enough fuel to get itself to Mars.
Oh, what kind of fuel do you know?
I know one of them is hydrazine. Another one is...
It's just a nuclear reactor.
Not a nuclear reactor. There is a small amount of... what is it? There's a small amount of nuclear material on board. It wasn't enough to run it. It was just enough to run a little experiment. It's got a pretty short half-life. But the theory is that if they can't contact it, the problem is it's so low, pardon me, that they only have about 9 minutes on each orbit to try to talk to it. Because it's moving so fast, they can't track it.
Oh, wow.
So they're having to use their radio, turn down the volume all the way, because these are instruments meant to send signals all the way to Mars.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So they're having to crank it down as much as they can. Then you kind of point it into the one area of the sky, kind of move it as fast as they can to track for the 7 minutes that they get each time. They haven't been able to contact it yet. There was some confusion about how long they had. There was early guesses that said they only had a few days before it would just come down and this battery run out.
Isn't kind of one of the you might actually be able to debunk this for me, but I had heard that one of the interesting facts about this little story here is that originally the first people to spot this thing just hanging out above Earth were amateurs. They weren't.
That's right.
That is true. Oh.
They were. They lost complete telemetry on the object. The Russians did, and they were looking for it. They were trying to figure out what happened to it, and some amateur astronomers in South America spotted it. And they said, "Hey guys, look over here."
It seems like the press sometimes delights a little bit in reporting on Russian space agency catastrophes. Do you pick up on that a little bit? Like there's just a
catastrophes in general.
Yeah.
I mean, space catastrophes are generally explosion-y.
Yeah. Yeah, so this one was more like the Excelsior in Star Trek 3, really. Just kind of got there and then just kind of pew, puttered out.
Yeah, kind of. Luckily, the Russians got a little bit more time. For no apparent reason, its thrusters went off a little bit and it got into a higher, more stable orbit.
Well, really? They just fired?
Yeah, they just sort of fired. Some onboard computer told it to fire itself. So they've got to the 1st of December to be able to salvage it enough to still get to Mars. There's a certain window of opportunity that they have to, where the planets are aligned just so that it could actually make it there.
Oh, that's how. So it's not just a matter of falling back down to Earth. It's also a matter of the position of Mars, of course.
Yeah. So they've got to the beginning of December to still try to salvage it enough to do that. But at this point, there is no telemetry. They think it'll be early January. If they can't, it'll be early January when it comes back down. It'll probably explode with all the fuel on board. Will ignite and it'll just explode in a giant ball of fire. And then most likely land in the ocean. Whatever survives. But hopefully they'll be able to contact it.
Talk about it frustrating, the contacting part. Just that whole delay that's built into the whole process just due to the, like you said, the fact that it's moving so fast and the limitations there with sending the signals. How frustrating to be working, every minute trying to save this thing, to get it out of orbit and off to Mars, and you can only try something every few minutes. And then you have to wait. Yeah,
there's 7 minutes every orbit that they get to try. And it's whatever signal they send to it is got to be done in 7 minutes.
Right.
They've got to download everything they can at that point.
So any instructions they need to send have to be able to upload, and any diagnostic information they wanted to download to determine what happened the last attempt also has to be done in that same window of time.
Yeah, if they want to reboot and get the reboot log, they have to send it. Maybe get it this time around, or maybe download it next time. So there's every country that I know NASA's tracking it, or the American government is tracking it, and there's various agencies listening for it or tracking it, and they're all kind of sending the Russians what they can.
Right. Yeah, hopefully, because people around maybe people in other areas of the world would be able to communicate it at different times, right? So while the Russians wouldn't be able to signal it, maybe another agency at the other end of the world would be able to. Is that what you mean?
That is a theory. Oddly enough, I haven't actually seen anything that shows that they are doing that. Now, I know in the past there's big radio dishes in Australia. So there are radio dishes in various countries that they could utilize. It just may not be, they have the right signal coding in one place, and it just doesn't make sense for them to fly across the world, all over the world, just keep all their scientists in one place. Maybe that's what they want to do.
Yeah, okay.
In case they have all the heads in one room in case they can talk to it at one point.
It would almost seem like they should also be able to just have, and of course, I'm sure there's some real good reason why they can't do this, but it would also just seem like maybe they could have, I don't know, a satellite in orbit that they could relay off of that would have a more constant connection with this thing.
It's possible, but the problem is that all the satellites up there are just up there to do their mission. So
yeah, they're not just sitting around
they're not just sitting around waiting for you to say bounce off and talk to my. And it still would be a similar issue, is that it's in a low orbit, it's moving quite fast.
I don't think you've seen enough movies, Mars. They can do that, no problem.
Of course.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Now, I know one thing that they were talking about also is having the space station crew try to aim some cameras where it might pass underneath to see if they can take some visual pictures from their perspective.
Oh, that would be pretty neat. Too bad they don't have some sort of handy space shuttle or something like that they could just fly up there and look at stuff with. No.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any other thoughts on this here story?
No, it's sort of an ongoing thing. We'll just kind of have to see how it goes. And
I would ideally, I think the best case scenario here, of course, obviously, would be that they could begin to communicate it, because this is totally, completely selfish. I admit that, but I was looking forward to tracking the progress of this thing on the show.
Yeah. I was looking for it. There's U.S. rover launching next week. So, it's these ongoing things, and this mission in particular had the Russian one that they were going to land on the Mars moon and bring something back. It had a Chinese orbiter. It had planetary society stuff. There were various things that were going on with it. So,
sounds like it was going to be
keep my fingers crossed for the Russians. Hopefully it'll work out for them. But it's so hard to say with some of these things.
And what a huge loss of financial investment if they can't get it going. Because billions, I'm sure. I don't know what it would be. It would be in rubles, I guess. But it would be tons of money.
Yeah, it's money, it's time, it's hardware, it's lost science.
Yeah.
It hurts when this kind of a thing happens.
Yeah. All right, should we move on?
Mm-hmm.
We'll update folks when we get more information too. So if we have good news next week, you'll hear it here first. Don't worry, everyone. All right. Well, let's go on to the SciByte News Bite. And this week we have another story right off the top of the News Bite that has to do with our brains.
Yes, the brain keeps coming back as a popular topic. This one, it's with memory.
Well, I like my brain. It's pretty handy.
Yeah, and remembering things is nice.
Yeah, usually. Like remembering to do a show always works out great.
Always handy. A lot of studies have to do with memory deficits, with forgetfulness or the various types of diseases that you start losing your memory.
My grandma died of Alzheimer's.
Mine did also.
So that's always been something that I've been following pretty closely, because I'd love to see Alzheimer's cured.
Oh, of course, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
This particular study has to do with people with exceptional memories.
Oh,
These are people that can tell you what they were doing on November 2nd, 1989. That not only that it was a Thursday, but what they had for dinner and the weather that day. Just off the top of their head.
Yeah, I've heard of these people. These people are amazing. But
Yeah.
probably also slightly tortured.
Yes. That was one of the one things that they kind of found. They had the memory scans of these people and actually showed that certain parts of the brain were larger. Specific brain structures. I believe the lentiform nucleus in the core of the brain. They had large sections.
Ooh. So there's actually a more developed area of the brain.
Yes, it was more developed. It was bulkier. The interesting sort of odd thing about it was that it was the same brain region that they're looking at for obsessive compulsive disorder as well. So it's these same structures that are larger in superior memory are also larger in obsessive compulsive. Now, they did state that none of the people were clinically diagnosed with OCD, but sort of the way they organize dates in their brains, sort of the way they organize things sort of relieved anxieties. So it was interesting that they're kind of saying, I wonder if there's some sort of connection where it's a scale where you have, so it's not only looking at memory and how the brain works with memory and how you can kind of kick it into overdrive or what sections of the brain kick it into overdrive, but sort of as a side issue, how does exceptional memory tie into other things like obsessive compulsive disorder?
I am becoming more and more fascinated with the brain. So this kind of discovery is interesting because it kind of flips on its head what we're taught, at least in the U.S. school systems as a child, is that pretty much given a development issue, all children are created equal as long as you learn, study, and train yourself really hard. But what you are saying here is some students may actually have a medical advantage to be able to memorize the questions for the test. You could be providing high school students that listen to SciByte with a fantastic, scientifically sound excuse for not being able to get an A on their test.
Yes, I'm sorry, but my lenticulus nucleus is not big enough to memorize all 50 states in time for this exam, sir.
Right, exactly. And,
I'm not sure you're going to get any extra bonus points to make up for the states that you forget.
And all they have to do is listen because we have all of the references to all of the studies here, right here in the show notes. So people just go to the show notes and they get the links and they can say, look, here, teacher.
Yep, right here. Now, as the ongoing issue goes, is the brain is a complicated thing. It refers to itself as the brain. That's what we keep saying.
Right.
So sometimes it's sort of I wonder if that's just coincidence or I wonder if the actual structure of this part of the brain affects all these different things.
Right. And I'm starting to wonder, so if they know of an area, so they would be theoretically able to maybe do like a CAT scan. Like I've heard they've done CAT or whatever those MRIs are, where they've been able to see like people, some people that are murderers and things like that, they have like a darker spot in the area of their brain that might process emotion, right?
Yes.
So you originally started saying that they think this discovery might help them diagnose issues like Alzheimer's. How does knowing where memory is controlled help you with Alzheimer's research? I mean, I can kind of see how it would be related, but I'm not quite connecting the dots.
Yeah, well, the thing I was trying to indicate is that most of the studies have been towards memory loss so far. This is a study that went into a different direction, said, all right, well, what if we look at extra memory? What happens when memory goes into overdrive? Does that tell us anything about the brain?
Oh, yeah, okay. So kind of looking at the reverse instead of, okay.
Yeah.
So instead of looking at the loss side.
Yeah, this is the loss. What happens for the gain? When it's in overdrive, what happens? And if you can look at that, can you compare it against memory loss, various types of memory loss or poor memory, and sort of make some sort of connection or be able to tell this part of the brain to do something possibly in the future?
Maybe one day they'll even get to the part where they could do surgery on parts of the brain. Where they can kind of just, you have a little OCD, well, we'll just cut a little bit here, and then you won't have quite as much activity in this area, and it'll cure your OCD. Probably never will happen, but it leads to interesting options. All right, should we move on to the flexible brain implant?
Yes, speaking of options for your brain. So the brain contains billions of neurons that normally have their little electrical pulses that go off. But people with seizures, those pulses are abnormal, they're rapid fire, they do crazy things, and seizures happen. You have loss of consciousness, or the convulsions, or there's many other types of seizures. So what the National Institute of Health did is there are some sheets that they can put on the brain that can read the impulses, that they actually, take off a piece of your skull and put a little implant down, and it'll read the electrical impulses from your brain so that they can try to diagnose where these seizures are coming from. These are for people that are just...
So it's like a detection grid.
Yeah, it's a detection grid. It's not just for normal seizures, it's for people that it's drug resistant. They really don't get a lot of help. And so far, what they do is the detection grid kind of lays down, and it's not been super accurate. It can't go down to the folds of the brain. But this new implant they've made is a quarter of the width of a hair. So it can kind of lay down into the folds of your brain, and it gives a much better reading of where these signals are coming from.
That's kind of disgusting when you actually describe it like that, but that's what it's doing. It's getting down in the nooks and crannies.
It's getting to the nooks and crannies, so it can more accurately describe what impulses are coming where.
Gross.
And so far, for these people that have really bad seizures, they locate the part of the brain that's triggering them, and they go in and they cut out a piece of the person's brain.
Oh, wow. So, like earlier, what I was saying, that's kind of what they're doing.
Yeah, they are. These are for really serious issues that's interrupting the person's life.
Yeah.
And so their theory is that if something like this is there, well, it's the same type of... The signals that they're seeing in the brain are the same type of weird electrical signals they see for heart arrhythmias. So what if you could use one of these like a pacemaker for certain people's hearts? If you could just send a little shock to a certain part of the brain to snap it out of that signal instead of having to cut out that part of the brain, could you just send a little signal to that part of the brain, disrupt the seizure, and fix it that way?
Right. And I suppose you could always go from there too, but I like the it's not quite the same thing comparing it to a pacemaker, but it gives you a good frame of reference to kind of think how something like this might work. So they open you up, they lay down this probably it only cover the area that they've determined is having issues.
Yeah, they put it on a certain part of your brain. It kind of lay down in some of the nooks and crannies.
But if something like this works to stimulate an area of the brain that causes seizures, and if they could determine other areas of the brain are related to things like we were just talking about for Alzheimer's, maybe you could also stimulate those areas with something like this and get similar results. I mean, this doesn't necessarily the only thing it'll work for seizures, because you're just stimulating the area of the brain that controls the seizures.
For right now, they're focusing on seizures because they are electrical, and they know that this is an electrical issue. The brain waves do a funny thing. They do this.
Right.
There's, for Alzheimer's, I believe there are some other issues going on, not just the electrical issues in the brain.
You got to figure, though, there's a lot of things that happen in the brain that is just because of things not firing correctly, because it's an electrical system, right? It's a wire. It's a really complex network of wiring that has a small impulse signals that it transmits almost like a data packet. And if those data packets get interrupted, or you don't get a complete packet, you get mixed signals. And Snickers in the chat room is saying, what about something like being able to treat things like schizophrenia that are also, maybe chemical based, maybe electrical based, we don't know. Some things like maybe schizophrenia that might be a chemical imbalance might not be fixed by something like this, but the potential to have this apply. The potential
is there that if they can read that perhaps for this person, their brainwaves do something funny before they have, a hallucination or a fit, or they go into some altered state of mind. Do the brainwaves do a certain thing every time? And if they do, does a little shock to this part of the brain or that part of the brain knock them out of that?
Maybe they just need little shrooms. Sounds like they just need to expand their mind, man, and have a little mushroom experience. And I don't know. It just kind of sounds like it.
Yeah, this kind of thing opens up a lot of opportunities to say, this is something that is very thin. It really fits on the brain very tightly, and it can get in there. And it's another option other than having to go in and cut out a piece of the brain. Can you just sort of shock the brain in this way or that way, very low voltage, just sort of in your head. It's doing its processing thing, and it knocks you out of whatever is going on.
Much like the pacemaker kind of shocks the heart back into cooperation. I like that.
Says, hey, get back into shape.
What do you think? Any other thoughts on the story?
No, I think we can
move on, you say, Mars?
Yes.
All right, let's talk about another news here in the SciByte News Bite section. And did a supernova kick-start our solar system? What's this about?
Well,
I would say that seems like we're at least from stardust, so we're at least from some sort of star explosion or something at some point, right?
Well, yeah, in 1 degree, supernovas are what get us a lot of the heavier elements. So all the elements that are making up the microphone that I'm talking on, my laptop, me, there are a lot of heavier elements that came from supernovas.
I've seen you. You're not a heavy element. You're a lightweight element.
Well, there's carbon in me. I'm sure there's other elements, iron or other stuff floating around inside me.
So, okay. All right. I see your point.
But more than that is that our current models of planetary formation, say there's, a star and then a big glob of gas around it. But the question is, what kickstarts these to start having pieces inside it glob together, make planets, make asteroid belts?
Well, that is a good question.
So one of the theories is that maybe a supernova had 15 or so light years away. If it exploded, the shock wave came through and sort of perturbated the gas cloud that we are in, like a rock hitting the water and the ripples go out. What if the ripples hit our gas cloud, disrupted it enough to start getting things to glom together?
Clump together, sort of knock things around and get them smashing into each other and becoming larger objects as they hurl into each other at high speeds.
Yeah, and more than that, scientists were actually able to look at asteroids and some of the oldest pieces of our solar system. And they're able to look at the radioactive element aluminum-26. This has an incredibly long half-life, but the amount of it seeded into our solar system is such that they can guess how fast it got, that it was seeded in 20,000 years. And the amount that we have and the speed at which it was added to our solar system.
That's incredible.
They really can't say. They say, you know what? It's really unlikely that just nearby stars seeded on. It seems like that would have to be from the shockwave of a supernova. And on top of that, another scientist looked at a different model coming at it from a different direction, saying, what if I look at the three-dimensional models of this kind of thing and simulating it triggering from a cloud collapse and what would be required to get all the radioactive elements inside it? And his model also said it looks like you need a supernova about 15 light years away.
Okay, so that's pretty close.
Yeah. But they can say that because of this specific radioactive element and how much of it's here, that a little over 4.5 billion years ago, a supernova went off, and that probably triggered everything happening to start our solar system rolling.
All it took was the blowing up of one star.
Yes.
That seems like a kind of... Are you ever just completely floored by all of the amazing series of events that took place, from the Big Bang on up to let us sit here and record this show?
Everything.
It's pretty mind.
Everything in astronomy makes me go,
wow.
Wow.
Yep, I agree. That's actually, honestly, one of the things I liked the most about Carl Sagan's videos was that he would always sort of put that into such amazing context. Like, I think back to, you remember that Carl Sagan, I don't know if it's part of the Cosmos or what, where he breaks down the entire history of the universe into a calendar? And and the entire existence of, since humanity has been here and Earth and all that stuff takes up one small corner of the edge of December 31st in the entire calendar if you were to put the entire universe in this calendar. And it's just the way he framed things made you realize, like, wow, we really are just a bunch of stardust and incredible elements that have come together. And this is one of those key things that made our solar system possible.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. If you wanted to time travel and you could stop supernovas, you would probably stop the formation of humanity.
Yeah, don't do that one. Don't stop that supernova.
Because if you did, then we wouldn't be able to talk about...
That is worse than killing off your grandfather.
That's true. That's true.
Because that would interrupt Jupiter broadcasting.
Or making out with your future mom in the 50s in a car in the parking lot of the high school before the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. Yeah, that would also be bad.
Even worse than that.
Because if you did that, we wouldn't be able to talk about nano shag carpet that absorbs light.
Yes.
I love the story. I just love the name.
The pictures of this, once you see it, it describes it.
So the interesting thing about this that I found that black paint only absorbs about 90% of light, which I didn't know there was a number, but there's something else I want you to talk about here is that in space, black paint kind of turns silvery.
Yes, it does. So they have these space telescopes that you think you want to decrease the amount of light bouncing around inside them so that you can get the most bang for your buck out of the starlight that's actually coming in. But black paint doesn't really do it. In the cold and the vacuum of space, it actually kind of looks a little silvery. So it's not as good. So they're always trying to figure out better ways to absorb the light in various wavelengths.
I love this.
They've got nanomaterials that can absorb light in these specific wavelengths or those specific wavelengths, and they're complicated processes oftentimes to make it work. But this material is made up of a whole bunch of carbon nanotubes grown on silicon or titanium or something. And it's just a whole bunch of tubes coming up out of it. Literally like shag carpet.
In a bunch of different directions too, which must be part of the magic, right?
That is definitely part of the magic. And it is absorbing 99% of ultraviolet, of visible, of infrared, of far infrared light that hits it.
Wow.
This stuff is absorbing across such a wide spectrum and so much of the light. They were actually, believe they were kind of surprised by it. They knew it was going to absorb light, and they knew it was going to absorb, a good variety of the spectrum.
But 99%?
But 99% of pretty much everything.
Yeah. That is really cool. Especially of all the different spectrums.
Of all the different spectrums. So they could use it to... This could be used in high contrast, like looking for planets orbiting around other stars. This could help telescopes do that. Even looking at the Earth. Looking at the Earth for specific things, it's hard for satellites and telescopes because there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of light. There's radio, there's television, there's all sorts of stuff that's coming from the Earth that gives a lot of noise, so it makes it hard to look at the details of some of the things coming from Earth. So you could use this to narrow down and really look at a specific area of a planet around another star, or look at the Earth in a specific way, or the atmosphere of the Earth, to be able to look at this stuff and not get all this light pollution, essentially, from around you.
This was a project out of NASA, right? This was something that, I think it says here, came out of the Goddard Space Flight Center.
Yep, Goddard Flight Space Center.
So NASA's just always working on the coolest crap, aren't they?
They're always looking at a lot of different stuff. They've got various groups of people looking at a variety of things. So,
and one of them was this.
And one of them was soaking up the light.
Now, do they make this kind of stuff generally available to like private companies to use, or is this? How does that work? Because it would seem like NASA doesn't build all the telescopes in the world, and they don't do all that kind of stuff. So they got to work with the people that would need this.
Mm-hmm. There's various ways that it works out. They've got some of the things that come from this are contract work, and there are specific contract work for small businesses. Say that I just happen to know about this fairly well because I deal with these. That if my company has a contract with NASA and we make something really cool and really awesome, we can take a patent out on it. NASA paid for it. We can patent it. They get free use of it, and then we can have our patent for everyone else to use.
So is it something kind of similar when they develop it?
That's what I'm not sure. It depends on what... that's why I'm not really sure. I'm not sure where this program came from.
Yeah, okay.
It came from, if it started in a contract, or if it started with a professor at a college that they were working with, or if it was just in-house.
It could have been a contractor, though.
Yeah, it could have been a contractor.
Okay.
It could have been a lot of different things, but
Okay.
generally it'll be a lot of the types of this specific thing. The cost to worth ratio, NASA is going to use a lot of it, or other government agencies, space agencies are going to want it. So I think there might be some trading back and forth.
Oh, okay.
In the industry saying, hey, we need to use that. We'll give you the technology for this.
Sure.
There's always that kind of thing. But this is the type of technology that is really cool. It could be used for other things. I know sight scopes for even hunters have specific ways that they try to cut down the light and the reflections inside. Or home telescopes, amateur astronomer telescopes. There's a lot of things where if it gets to a certain point of ease of use or ease of technology, then it work its way down.
Right.
But for a while, the people most interested in this would probably be the infrared telescopes and all these satellites and stuff, looking into space, looking into deep space.
And like you said, the other governments, like the Russian space program and things like that. That makes sense. Yeah.
And a lot of these are government space agencies right now.
Should we talk about the news that science brought to the horse community that rocked the horse community's world this week?
I found this just a little bit interesting. It's kind of funny. It's just a small note. These cave paintings that they see from ancient man showed horses with spots. And oftentimes these people were drawing just what they saw. And previous theories said that horses were probably just black or bay color. And that after the domestication was when spots came out.
Right.
But they can actually tell from the DNA whether a horse was bay or black or had some sort of generic variant that allowed for this leopard spot pattern.
Well, thankfully, I don't think anyone in my family is listening to SciByte because it's kind of late where they're at right now. But my stepmother is a horse fanatic, and I forget the breed because I'm a bad person. And I don't listen to my family enough, but I forget the breed. But it's spotted, and it's like this whole lineage that she's into to try to protect, to make sure she gets other ones that they can hump with that are also spotted.
Oh wow!
So it's like this, yeah. So I know I'm familiar with a bit of this that the ones that are spotted are considered like this, almost kind of like dogs, like a special breed of horse that has its own, club and all that kind of stuff. So this is really fascinating because although I don't know for sure, I believe always assumed that was a product of man, those spots, through some crossbreeding or something.
Yeah, and it's definitely that idea. And I've a lot thought that too, not only because of that, but because back in the 50s, there was a program over in Russia where they took silver foxes and they said, we're going to domesticate them and see what happens. And not like really hard on, like really trying to domesticate hard. It was just taking the most amiable pups in each litter and then combining them and then going on. And even just after a few generations, they started getting mottled coats. The tail started curling up over their back. It started taking on the traits of domestic dogs. And they weren't doing anything other than breeding these silver fox that didn't run away when they came close, that were sort of interested in humans.
The ones that might have had more tame traits, you might say.
Yeah, they were just breeding for tame traits, and from that came these colored coats and stuff. So I thought that, that kind of a thing would probably transfer over to horses. But it looks like in some way before domestication that there were some prehistoric horses that had spots.
Well, let me ask you this. Why wouldn't it apply to people?
Have you met a domesticated person?
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, if people, that aren't hostile breed with another person who isn't hostile, wouldn't they go on to maybe potentially have more docile babies?
Sure.
Isn't that possible? Because if it works with horses and it works with dogs, I'm just saying, it seems like it might be. I mean, I know it's a little brutal.
That's the nature versus nurture question.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, you're right.
You can have the wild pup in the litter.
Right.
You always hear those stories, of all the multiple kids and one's the wild child or one's the little quiet bookworm in the corner while everyone else is going crazy.
The chat room thinks I'm talking about spotted people. No, you guys, you misunderstand.
That's okay, chat room. I thought he was going there too. I thought we were going into the Purple People Eater song.
Can we go to one of my favorite stories of the week, because the Russians are being so badass with this rocket that they have launched. I am intensely impressed.
You watched the video.
It is really great. Now, I will say this thing launched on November 13th, and
Yes.
It launched what looks to be in like just a snowstorm, like a total complete blizzard. Is that what was going on?
It was snowing. There was no wind. The wind died down, and the wind was the issue that they were running up against. Now, NASA, they have rules against rain and snow and stuff like that. They would not have launched.
No, I mean, with the space shuttle, it seems like, you hear about the space shuttle would be canceled all the time.
They wouldn't launch space shuttle. I don't think they'd launch satellites off in snow.
Oh, okay.
But the Russians, this is their launch pad in Central Asia, and the wind died down enough, and it's snowing. There's 6 inches of snow on the ground, and it's 24 degrees, and they say, let's push the button and go.
Well, I mean, it's cold in space, right? There
was one NASA astronaut and 2 Russian cosmonauts. They, for the first time, actually had to take out these blue parkas and toss them over their spacesuits as they walked outside to keep the snow from falling on them.
I just wanted to comment, too, that when they launched into space, they brought in Angry Birds.
They did.
That's
it is a Russian tradition that they hang some sort of toy, and it's because they're all strapped down in, that the toy will start floating when they hit 0G. It's just sort of a fun
We're in 0G now, the toy's floating.
Yeah, the toy's floating. And this time, they brought an Angry Bird.
Only they say it in some hilarious Russian accent. It's really funny if you were to hear it as an American.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I saw that, I just thought, man, those Russians really seem like they have a pair of gonads on them, because it's almost like, to me, I think I'm just a little vulnerable from not having a space shuttle right now, Heather, because you got to understand, I grew up in the era of the space shuttle.
Yeah.
And so to not have one doesn't make sense. It just doesn't, my brain doesn't understand that.
Yeah.
And so now,
kindergarten, me wouldn't go to school if there's a space shuttle going off, unless my mom promised to record it.
Oh, that is so cool.
I was like, you'll record it, right? She's like, yes, now please go to school. Get on the school bus. I'll record it. Go.
No, what I'm saying is, so the Russians are our age-old space nemesis, right?
Yeah.
And now it just seems like they're lapping us. Like, not only are they launching crap up to the International Space Station while we don't even have something that gets us out of Earth, but they're also doing it in a snowstorm, which we would never do.
No. Well, each government will have different rules and regulations. NASA has had a couple of times where things have happened.
Oh, yeah.
These catastrophic losses. And so there are a lot of rules that say all of these things must align. None of those things can happen for us to do it.
Wasn't it also, though, that the space shuttle was kind of a fragile ship?
It was a very particular piece of hardware that was, at this point, 30 years old.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That was once it started flying. I mean, it was 15 to 20 years in the making of the planning. So it is an old idea.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So now, tomorrow, they are arriving at the International Space Station.
That is right. 2 days from launch to arrival, and this will be the new crew. The people they're going to be meeting, 3 people up there. So for the first time in a little while, we'll have 6 people on the space station.
Oh.
Now, the other 3 are coming back down on the 21st. So they're coming back down pretty soon. But the 3 that just launched will have their crewmates come up. Let's see. So they'll be coming up pretty soon. And they'll be there until March of 2012.
So the capsule that they're in is called the Dragon capsule? Am I getting that right? That's sitting on top of the rocket?
I believe you're looking for it a little bit further down the show notes.
Oh, I might have. That's something new, huh?
Yes.
I was going to say, I hadn't heard of this before, okay.
Yeah, one of the exciting things that they'll be able to see is that this will be the first crew where SpaceX, their Dragon capsule, and Orbital Sciences, Cygnus Freighter, the private industry, has scheduled to carry out demonstration flights that they can take stuff to the space station.
Oh, cool.
And so they'll be the first crew on the space station. They'll possibly see private industry come to the station to prove that they can do it, so they can start bringing supplies up.
That's amazing, really. That we can have a private industry that can become a cargo transport to a space station.
Yeah.
I mean, hello. Did you hear what I just said?
Yeah.
We're going to have a private industry that's going to fly cargo to a space station. That's awesome. That is really exciting. That's because that's so in the future. Well, I didn't mean to jump us ahead. Is there anything else you wanted to cover in the story with them getting to the space station and all that?
I believe that was the majority of it. We got a couple of people up there. They're coming back down soon. New crews going up.
And they could see the first private ship or private delivery.
They'll see.
So
hopefully see the first.
What's this note we have in here about the last 14 miles for the Endeavour?
Yes, the space shuttles, as people know, are finding their homes in various museums. And the Endeavour, after traveling 122 million miles in orbit, they are having to plan for its last 14 miles between LAX and the California Science Center.
Oh, okay.
Now you think, okay, it's 14 miles, but you're moving a 6-story, 180,000-pound spacecraft with a 70-foot wingspan between LAX and the California Space Center.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea it was actually that big.
Yeah, it is huge. And it was kind of funny because along the route, what California seemed to be very worried about was the Randy's Donuts sign. That's the classic one where it's like the little tiny store and a big giant donut sitting on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, yeah, don't mess with our donut.
It's an icon.
It's an icon. So they're having to plan. It'll, just plan very carefully which roads can handle the weight, where you have the clearance for the wingspan, how you can get it there safely. I mean, the donut sign may be important, but the shuttle is pretty important too.
Right, yeah.
I mean, the California Space Center had to jump through a lot of hoops.
I mean, I don't know if it's donut sign important, because it's not like we're going to use it anymore. No.
We're going to look at it in a museum.
Yeah.
It's not going to provide us donuts.
Right, exactly.
It's not going to point the way to donuts.
Yeah. I mean, I can eat donuts for the rest of my life, yeah.
You still can go drive to a museum and see it.
Yeah, that's true. And you know what? On my way to the museum, I'm going to want to probably pick up donuts. So
I want a donut now.
If I can't get donuts, then really I'm not going to go see it in the first place.
Oh, why would you not see a space shuttle without donuts?
Exactly. So they really need to work together on this one. Well, that's great. Should we jump into the science calendar section now of the show?
Yeah.
All right. Well, you know what we like to do is we like to start the calendar section with a looking back first. Wait, do I have a looking back jingle?
You do. I was like, where's our time travel sound?
Oh yeah, time travel. Right, we can time travel. Yeah, let's. Here, let me start up the SciByte computer for the time travel mode here. And wait, let's see here. That's the looking up. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it either. I don't have the time machine this week. I tell you what.
That's okay.
That's what we can look just
we'll
at the time
glass. We'll pull it up on
glass.
the computers.
Yeah, there you go. So November 22nd, 1809. So this is 202 years ago. What do we have?
Mm-hmm. The first patent was issued in the U.S. for a metallic writing pen.
Oh, wow.
Made from steel rolled from wire with a steel quill that wouldn't need sharpening or cutting. Because you had pens before then, and they would have the quill nib that would wear down, or you'd have to resharpen it. This is steel, you wouldn't have to worry about that. Now, there were still pens being used in Britain before this patent, but it just happened to be the first one issued in the U.S.
Oh, okay. So the pen was already mightier than the sword over in Britain.
Yes.
We were a little late. All right. Well, let's talk about November 19th, 1872, 139 years ago. Cha-ching!
Yes, the adding machine. First U.S. patent for the adding machine, capable of printing totals and subtotals.
Wow, boy, I bet an accountant's job became much, much easier. All right.
Accountants everywhere were much happier.
Oh, the wife's birthday, November 21st, 1877. Ooh. Although, not the year, obviously. Yeah. 134 years ago. What happened?
Edison's phonograph. Thomas Edison announced the invention of his talking machine. Oh. Now, originally, it was a tinfoil cylinder recorder that preceded his phonograph. And the indentions in the tinfoil could only be played back a few times.
Oh, really?
Before just the process of reading it back sort of flattened out the tinfoil again.
Ruined it.
So you'd only get a few playbacks, but he was starting on the process. And he showed it had it in New York City in early February of 1878, but they hadn't really figured out uses for it yet.
Yeah, they're like, what would we use something like this for? It just doesn't make any sense.
It's really cool, though.
Yeah, that's funny. It's funny how some like stuff today that just seems so indispensable. At first, they couldn't even think of a use for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny how things move or how things change. All right, November 19th, 1895, 116 years ago.
The first U.S. patent for a paper pencil was issued.
Wow, on the same day that the pen patent was issued. Or
just
not,
a few,
or the same week.
Yeah, on the same.
I should remind people this isn't the same day. This is the same science week.
Yes.
Same science week.
It was the same day in history, just a couple years later.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. All right, so then November 16th, 1972. That's just 39 years ago. We got Skylab 3. So was this like some sort of early space station?
Yeah, it was carrying 3 astronauts launched from Cape Canaveral in Florida. They had an 84-day mission that was the longest American space flight for 2 decades.
Oh, wow. I remember hearing about this, actually. Probably like in school, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
All right, okay. All right, we got another one for you. This one just came a mere 13 years ago, November 20th, 1998.
The first module of the International Space Station was launched, and this date made me feel old.
Why? Because you remember?
I remember that.
I do too.
Yep, it was launched on a Russian Proton rocket. Just 2 weeks later, the U.S. launched the connecting module so that U.S. stuff could be connected to it.
I remember Boeing had I remember all of the videos that were put out before the space station was even
when they were
being
talking
assembled. Yeah, when they were talking it up, and like Boeing had videos out that were like 3D renderings of it.
Mm-hmm. It was Canada and Japan and 11 members of the European Space Agency. There were a lot of different countries coming together sort of after, this is after the Cold War. The Russians are, invited to come. And this is sort of all the space agencies after everything has happened going, let's all work together.
Right. We can further science together. Well,
yes, let's work together and build this thing in space.
11 different countries, right?
Just in the European group.
Oh, really?
There was NASA, Canada, Japan, Russia, and then 11 members of Europe.
Oh, wow. Wow. Only 13 years ago, but yet it does seem like a really long time ago. All right. Well, that concludes the looking back. Are you ready to look up?
Yes.
What do we have in the sky this week?
The sun has been incredibly busy these last few weeks. We had another ejection from the sun on the 11th to provide another one of those cool little animated GIFs. Went past Mercury on the 13th. It was projected to hit Venus on the 14th.
It's ripping through space.
Yeah, just ripping through space, hitting all these. And this was one that it was going to pass through right on top of one of the sun satellites. You have the 2 out there that are looking at the sun, giving us a 360-degree view. This is one that would pass right over one of them. So it might be able to
destroy it, though?
No, well, I mean, they're meant to look at the sun. They know that these kind of things are going to happen.
Yeah, makes sense.
But it's interesting when it's going to hit right on top of it because they have a chance to look at it.
How awesome is that?
Yep. And also a filament that was 1 million kilometers long across the sun. A piece of it broke off.
I didn't know that happened.
On the 14th. It just happened.
Oh, okay.
It was on the right, you can see a picture sort of.
Yep.
Whoop, and then just a chunk of it disappears.
Yeah.
That's where they'd been watching this for a while, and then suddenly a big chunk of it just broke off from the sun.
Our sun seems like it's been more active than I recall it being reported on in the past. Has this been like an unusually strong period of solar activity?
There has been kind of a little bit of a flurry of activity. We're starting to lead up into the more active part of the sun. Some of it is that we're getting a weekly update on what the sun is doing. The sun is a busy place. And sometimes we just don't realize how busy it is.
True. Yeah, that's a good point. So does this kind of mean that people in certain areas might get a good light show in the atmosphere when it does make its way here?
The mass ejection that hit Mercury and Venus was not aiming for the Earth. So nothing predicted for big aurora. I don't think the filament that broke off is heading towards Earth either.
Okay. So I suppose if I was on Mercury, then I'd probably get a good light show.
You would have gotten a mighty show had there been an atmosphere.
Right. I mean, there's some technicalities to work out. I grant you that. But I would have got a show.
Yeah, I don't know how long the show would have lasted for you. It would have been really bright.
All right. So anything I should be particularly keeping an eye out up in the sky? Like anything maybe?
This week.
We had Jupiter recently, right?
Yep, Jupiter's been pretty active. The Leonid meteor shower is this week. It's peaking on Thursday. It is going to have to contend with the moon. The last quarter moon is on Friday. So it's a little bit shine, but the Leonid meteor shower is one of the more well-known meteor showers out there.
Yeah, okay.
So probably a few more meteors than usual, depending on how dark the sky is or when the moon's up for you. But we have the moon will be near Mars on Friday and Saturday. It'll be to the upper left of the moon early Saturday morning. On Saturday, you'll be able to see Venus low in the southwest.
Cool.
And Mercury will be just below that. You might need some binoculars to see Mercury, though.
Okay. Dang.
Yeah. And then Saturn will be in the southeast early next Tuesday morning.
The day after the wife's birthday.
Yes.
All right. So I got to remember that. So the day after the wife's birthday that's when I get to see Saturn.
Yes.
And will that just look like a dot? If I wanted to see anything cool, I would obviously have to have a telescope.
Yeah, you'd have to have a pair of binoculars. You can actually see the rings. You can kind of see that it's squashed.
Cool. That's cool. That's a good opportunity. Well, I love learning about the stuff that's up in the sky because then when I go out and do chores early in the morning, when the kids wake me up, or late at night when I'm up, I always get to look and be like, oh yeah, Heather told me about that.
Hey, there's a planet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know what that is. Heather said it was this. And of course, you can always go back and refer to all the stuff that we talked about if you see something like that, because Heather notes all this down in the show notes. And people say a lot, actually. I've got surprised by this. People say, what are the show notes? In the show notes, you go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, you go to SciByte, and you click on any of the episodes there where you would normally watch the video or download it. If you just scroll the page down, show notes.
Yep, with loads of extra data and where all this information comes from. You can go check it out, read some more stories. Oftentimes social Twitter followings or Facebook followings, if you like that kind of stuff.
We should give the folks in the live stream a shout out for staying up late, because I know it's pretty late where some of them are. You can always join us live over at jblive.tv on Tuesdays at 7:30 p.m. Any other things you want to cover in this episode of SciByte, Mars?
No, I'm looking forward to next week. We'll be able to talk about the new Mars rover that'll be launching off just the day after Thanksgiving.
Oh, how exciting. I'll be looking for all
next week. There'll be loads of information on that.
Yeah, and then the week after that, coming up towards the end of the month, will be the first video edition of the SciByte since the relaunch. Yep,
I'm already starting getting some of those updates and videos together for that.
Cool. I know people have been looking forward to that. So we'll have a video version. And actually, we've been making sort of an unofficial video cut down. It's just a capture of the live stream. It's got some of the visuals we talk about. If you are interested in that, there'll probably be a link available over at the website as well. All right, Heather. Well, thanks for joining me this week.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And be sure to go over to the site and get the notes. And remember, if you want to support the show, you can grab one of those audio books. And we'll see you right back here next week.